One of the bigger things that I've seen Vancouver Canucks fans bring up on the radio and on social media a bunch the past few days has been the newest signee on the forward group that is probably going to play with Elias Pettersson. Let's talk today about Jake DeBrusk and a few interesting player comparisons that make a lot more sense than you would initially think about upon first glance. So, Jake DeBrusk, as we had talked about when he initially signed with the Vancouver Canucks 2 days ago, is a really interesting name because with the Boston Bruins, DeBrusk was in a pretty tough spot. He was playing in the middle six of the lineup, he wasn't really being given too much opportunity, but this is a player who has a lot of skill, he's got a lot of scoring ability, and he's a pretty renowned two-way presence as well. He's not going to blow your socks off, he's not Esa Tikkanen out there, but what he does on the ice is pretty stable throughout all three zones. The problem was, because DeBrusk wasn't given much opportunity, because he was behind players like Marchand, like Taylor Hall, because you gotta remember that guy was on Boston for a little bit, DeBrusk was never really able to grab that potential that he had. He wasn't able to utilize that to the best of his ability. And he's a player who maxed out in Boston, getting 50 points in 64 games played in 2022-2023. Pretty good player, honestly. Like, those numbers are not bad at all. Even in this most previous playoffs, he had 11 points in 13 games for the Bees as one of the more important players going up against the Florida Panthers. He was a point per game in that series. But with a new opportunity in Vancouver, things are starting to look very interesting because for the first time in Jake DeBrusk's career, it seems like he is going to be promised a spot near the top of the lineup. And what I wanted to talk about as well were some of the minutes that were discussed here. This was a tweet posted from Off the Bar Tunes. Another thing to consider about the Jake DeBrusk signing for the Canucks, look at the average time on ice for Vancouver's top three forwards last season. Petey had 19 minutes and 39 seconds, Miller had 19 minutes and 29 seconds, and Besser had 18 minutes and 36 seconds. Compare this to Jake DeBrusk, whose average ice time was 16:49. DeBrusk is going to see 2 to 3 more minutes of ice time per game. He will see number 1 power play unit time, at least early on to see if he's a fit, and possibly PK time as well. He averaged 136 time on ice penalty killing with the Boston Bruins. More time on ice with better players equals more opportunities, equals more goals, and more points. This is going to be a career year for Jake DeBrusk. Now, the thing is, when you talk about Jake DeBrusk in his playoffs, we just said he was a point per game in the Florida series. Well, he was averaging 18, 19 minutes per game in that Florida series. He had a 21-minute game as a forward and still scored a point on the only Boston Bruins goal in game number 6. As Jake DeBrusk was trusted more in Boston and was given more minutes in Boston, he started producing more in Boston. But this sample of the playoff series against Florida was the only sample of consistent 19-minute hockey Jake DeBrusk was being given out. The rest of the regular season, he was hovering around 14, 15, 16 minutes of time on ice per game, and that is when he was really at a limited scoring rate. He still had some points, but it was not as crazy as when he was playing against Florida. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm using one playoff series sample to say that Jake DeBrusk is a much better player than the Boston Bruins thought he was, but this has been a pattern for the guy's entire career, pretty much. He's been in this spot where he hasn't been utilized, and as a result, he hasn't shown off his potential. And the reason I wanted to talk about this particular topic in this video is because we're seeing a lot more sentiment from Vancouver Canucks fans that compares and contrasts the similarities of the Jake DeBrusk story to one of JT Miller. Chef Alvin tweeted this out. It had 33,000 views. People that don't like the DeBrusk signing, JT Miller was putting up similar stats before coming to Vancouver. DeBrusk will be a 70 to 90 point guy. Book it. And okay, that's a pretty interesting idea, and honestly, I can see the similarities because when you think about Jake DeBrusk and you think about JT Miller, they both have pretty similar styles of games, I would say. Miller, I think, is a lot more refined with his playmaking, but these guys both compete hard, they can both play two-way games, they can both penalty kill, they both play with pace, and they can both score points. They're both cut from a pretty similar two-way molded cloth of hockey player. And another similarity was the opportunity, because when JT Miller was in Tampa Bay, he was kind of maxing out as a 40, 50-point guy. A lot of people kind of recognized there was talent there, especially since he was a first-round prospect from the New York Rangers. But JT Miller was playing behind the likes of, name your pick: Nikita Kucherov, Steven Stamkos, Braden Point, Tyler Johnson, Andre Palat. Miller was a part of a stacked Lightning team. And coming over to Vancouver, a lot of people were super upset about the trade because the Canucks gave up a first-round pick and everything in between, but Miller, with more ice time and more of an opportunity, first power play, immediate top six, was able to be a point-per-game guy. He had 72 points in his 69-game sample in his first year with Vancouver. Now, Miller then declined a little bit, then he went back up, he scored 99 points, and then he had 82 points the year after that. A still pretty good season, but a lot of Canucks fans wanted to see him traded. But the Canucks did not trade him, he stuck around, and then this previous season he had a 103-point year. So, he's looking good. Meanwhile, for Jake DeBrusk, if you wanted to compare and contrast the two, let's use the Elite Prospects comparison tool to help us out here. In JT Miller's final season as a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning, he put up 47 points in 75 games. Jake DeBrusk, at the same age, put up 42 points in 77 Boston Bruins games. The year after that, you can see that Miller was in Vancouver. He had his point-per-game year. DeBrusk is still in Boston, and then the same thing happened the year after that. But if you wanted to compare 27-year-old years, DeBrusk and Miller were roughly similar stylistically. Of course, Miller had a much better points per game, but DeBrusk had the playoff run with 11 points in 13 games. So one may think that if Jake DeBrusk is able to follow in the footsteps of that JT Miller, get more opportunity, use it better, and score more points, maybe Jake DeBrusk does go out there and have a 70-point year next season. Who really knows? If you're still on the upward trajectory thing, you gotta remember, JT Miller went from 70 points to 40 points to 90 points to 80 points to 100 points from ages 26 to 30. Jake DeBrusk is 27 years old. He has opportunity to grow here still. Last year, the Vancouver Canucks turned Andrei Kuzmenko, a random dude out of Russia, into a 70-point, near 40-goal guy. And a lot of that was due to Elias Pettersson. The chemistry that they formed was immediate, it was dazzling, it was very, very good. And Andrei Kuzmenko had a fantastic season because of it. Now, he declined the year after that. You could say it's because of Rick Tocchet's system, you can say whatever. But that's the effect that the Vancouver Canucks can have on these newer guys being thrusted into immediate top six roles. Not to mention the fact that Andrei Kuzmenko not fitting in with Tocchet's system wasn't really surprising, like we knew that there'd be some sort of an adjustment period afterwards, but Jake DeBrusk, hard-nosed winger. He plays a gritty game when he needs to. He can also score. He's got skill. This is the kind of guy that I think fits perfectly with what it is that Rick Tocchet is looking for out of his guys. And if you want to use that JT Miller comparison even further, hey, guess what? Miller absolutely improved when Rick Tocchet became the Vancouver Canucks head coach. Their understandings of the game just fit like a puzzle piece so well so that the Tocchet principles and ideas that he would share onto these players would be instantly applied by guys like JT Miller, by guys like Connor Garland, by guys like Dakota Joshua, like, potentially, guys like Jake DeBrusk. So, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about the similarities between the Jake DeBrusk story and what we have seen out of JT Miller in his Vancouver Canucks career up to this point. Do you think there's an argument to be made that Jake DeBrusk could be that next coming of JT in some sort of a fashion, and a guy who could really bolster up his value comparative to what a lot of Boston Bruins fans were used to seeing out of him every night? We saw for a very brief sample in the playoff series against Florida that Jake DeBrusk, when given minutes and opportunities, can be good. He can be a point-per-game guy. Especially in the playoffs, that's pretty noteworthy. You want to see that out of guys in the biggest moments. But for Vancouver Canucks fans, how does this make you feel, and do you think it's similar to one JT Miller? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. 99, and bye.